وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المأسومين واللعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الحكيم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فمن يرد الله أن يهديه يشرح صدره للإسلام ومن يرد أن يذله يجعل صدره ضيقا حرجا. آمنا بالله، صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Your second salawat for love of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. And your loudest salawat for ta'jeel faraj sahib al-asri wa zaman. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بذكرنا المسائب آل Muhammad. May Allah increase in our reward for commemorating the difficulties of Ali Muhammad. Our discussion is around the topic of justice and understanding and answering some difficult questions in life on the basis of the concept of justice. And that this justice is one of the essentials of Islam, and the more that we understand about it, the better our strength in our spirituality and our faith continues. The verse that we began our discussion with is a verse in which Allah makes the statement, He sends, that for whoever Allah wants to guide, and yahdiyahu, Allah wants to guide someone, He expands His chest for Islam. And for whomever He intends that He should cause him to err or to go astray, Allah closes His chest, makes it hard for him to process this knowledge. This ayah is often referred to and discussed with the intention of saying that predestination is something Allah has dictated. That Allah has already decided who will follow the message of Islam and who will not. And the argument comes that if this is the case, then where is God's justice? There are those who can follow guidance and who can follow the path, and there are those who can't. How can it be that we have free will, or that we have the freedom to make a choice, when Allah has already decided that Allah has decided that whoever He wants to help, He will help, and whoever He wants to go astray, He wants to go astray, will go astray. This idea of predestination, free will, which is it? Is it predestination? Is it free will? And what is the role of these two items? Presents to us a lot of difficult questions that we face when we talk about Islam. Especially when, for example, we talk about what happened in Karbala. Did it have to happen? Was it destined to happen? Did Allah insist on it happening? And if it was something that was known that this was danger and this was harm, then what did it mean when Imam Hussain proceeded without regard to the fact that this was harm? The misunderstanding of this concept of why did Imam Hussain continue down this path? Was he forced to do it? Did he not have a choice? Some people come about and they come to the conclusion that Imam Hussain had always intended, na'uzubillah, to throw away his life. And they make the mistake of sometimes calling and saying that Imam Hussain, na'uzubillah, intended to commit suicide, that he was trying to kill himself. Astaghfirullah. But if we can understand what happens in Karbala, how we approach this question, we can understand better what is the role that Allah plays in this and what is the justice of Allah in this process. So let's break this down in a few different steps. Are you guys okay? Sallu ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. The first thing we need to ask is, what is suicide? What is this suicide? This suicide, or the concept of suicide as it's discussed in Islam, is haram. There is no discussion or debate that suicide is haram, and suicide refers to the process by which a person intentionally kills themselves. However, one of the interesting things is that though this action is haram, if someone was to die by suicide, they are still entitled to full rights of a Muslim. You can't, na'uzubillah, if someone is seen to have killed themselves, you can't say, oh, هذا ليس مسلم بعد. He's not a Muslim anymore. Sar mulhid. He has left the religion of Islam because of this sin that he's committed. No, as a matter of fact, the rule of Islam is that even in spite of this, that if it looks like this person took their own life, you don't have the discretion to keep them away from the masjid. You don't have the discretion to avoid their prayers. You don't have the discretion not to bury them as a Muslim. It is wajib, kifa'i, that the Muslimin have to come forward and take responsibility for this burial and fulfill the rights of the individual. This concept that Islam presented, that, for example, that this action of dying in this fashion is not for example, something that casts you out of the religion of Islam, is now something that science is beginning to prove and understand why Islam had this policy. First and foremost, let's break it down to only looking at it in an Islamic perspective, is to say that if someone commits a sin, does that mean they're not a Muslim anymore? No. Otherwise, many of us would be in trouble. What happens? There are certain sins that are public, that can happen in public society. If one repents after that sin, Allah can forgive it entirely. There's nothing wrong with it. And then there are those sins in private that nobody knows about. Someone committing a sin does not take them outside of the religion of Islam. So first and foremost, the second thing, one of the things that we've learned about in science is what actually happens in this instance. There's a book written by Malcolm Gladwell called Talking to Strangers. In this book, he does an analysis of what actually happens in the concept of suicide. And he explains and he says that they stopped 500 people who wanted to jump off of the Golden Gate Bridge. Meaning that people would go to the Golden Gate Bridge to jump off and to kill themselves. And they accounted for 500 people that they stopped. And they said, after we stopped these 500 people, we followed up with them to see how many actually then went out and found another way, na'uzubillah, to end their life. He says, of the 500 people that we stopped, only 50 persisted in the process of, na'uzubillah, trying to kill themselves. He says, from this we drew the conclusion that most of the time what happens is that when a person enters a very difficult or emotional state and they try to resolve that conclusion in an emotional state, they can make a bad decision, the consequence of which is the ending of someone's life. But that most people, given the opportunity out of being outside of an extremely emotional state, wouldn't continue down that path and that process. Which is why one of the things that we say is that just because, na'uzubillah, someone looks like they killed themselves or that they did this, it doesn't mean that that was their intention. That actually Islam says that many times what happens is, jara alayhi junoon, that a person can go into a state of insanity, and in that state they can take an action, the consequence of which is irreparable, is unrepairable. That there was no actual intention for this action, and had they been in their conscious state of mind, they would have never made this decision. So which is why we don't look at somebody who, for example, na'uzubillah, is seen as, defined as, for example, that they kill themselves, oh, astaghfirullah, he's not a Muslim anymore. No. You don't know what the condition was, and the affair of judging that individual is up to Allah, not up to us. But the argument persists that a person who has the intention to cause themselves harm and to end their life, and the process by which one individually selects to end their life, is referred to as suicide. This is a really important topic, by the way. And I'll tell you why. Because social media, pop culture, has been normalizing this practice as a legitimate answer. And if you don't talk about it, children see that it's a legitimate option. Not long ago, they came out with a TV show that kids watched. Kids watched it. 13 Reasons Why. Some of you ever, don't tell me if you saw it, I don't want to know. I didn't see it either, I don't want to know. Don't tell me anything. I'm not looking at anybody. But the show's argument was that someone who didn't feel recognized, received the recognition, was able to explain their personality, their stance, or whatever it was, after they, na'uzubillah, killed themselves. And this became a legitimate option that children started seeing it, that this is something I could do. Even in our communities, there were children who were overcome by this example, that if I feel frustrated with who I am and what I'm going through, that this is a legitimate option for me to express myself. The reason that that happens is that we don't talk about these difficult conversations, we don't talk about these problematic issues and ideas and discuss them with our children and our families. That children have the right to learn this. We see the statement of Amir al-Mu'mineen where he gives the explanation, says, إِنَّ الْقَلْبِ الْحَدَثِ كَالْأَرْضِ الْخَالِيَةِ مَا تُلْقِي فِيهَا قَبِّلُهَا. Imam Ali explains, he says, understand something, that the heart of a child is like fertile soil. Whatever you plant in it, it will accept. What happens is, and why we have to police both social media, TV, every interaction that your child has in the outside society, including school, is that if I'm not talking to my child about a difficult concept or a problem or an ideology that Islam wants me to have an opinion about because I think the child is too young, and somebody else is talking to my child, they'll internalize that idea. And they'll say that this is the way I want to think about it. I'm thinking my kid's too young to talk about this, and others are talking to my child. So we have two options. Either one, we have these difficult conversations, or two, censor your children. Don't let them have access to these conversations. Otherwise, they'll start taking a look at these as legitimate options. And that's it. Between social media, between TikToks, between different things, this concept for a number of years was popularized. That, na'uzubillah, if you have problems and difficulties, one of the things you should do is try to end your life. And we thought our children are too young, astaghfirullah, don't talk to children about this. And instead, social media is educating them and saying to them, why not? That'll teach everybody, that'll show everybody, and the child, without realizing, indoctrinates himself into a false ideology. Now, going back to our topic of discussion, is this what Imam Hussain did in Karbala? No. This is not what Imam did, that he intentionally put himself in the path of perdition and intentionally intended to end his life. To understand what does the Imam do, what are the things that we have to accept, and we know this. Imam is ma'soom. Imam is sinless. But the question is how does his sinlessness work? An Imam's sinlessness is not a mu'jiza in the sense that, for example, the Imam wants to make a mistake, na'uzubillah, and an angel comes and says, don't do that. The Imam's sinlessness is not something that, for example, Allah hides things from him. Rather, someone asked our sixth Imam about the concept of the sinlessness that the Imam possesses, and Imam Sadiq explains, he says, our sinlessness is on the basis of our knowledge. When we see an action, we see its true value, and when it is something qabih, when it is something bad, when it is something ugly, we don't want to do it because of the ugliness that's present in this. This type of sinlessness is important and valuable, and there's a reason why Allah structured the sinlessness in the isma of Ahlul Bayt in this format. The reason He did it in this format is it's something that you and I can follow the example of, and the more that we increase in our education, the more we can stay away from sin. As a matter of fact, this is something that has happened in society and does happen in society right now. Shall I give you guys an example? Are you guys okay? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Think back to 30, 40 years ago for those that were alive, and those that weren't, imagine, pretend. 30, 40 years ago, did people wear seatbelts? No, they didn't. It was pretty common not to wear a seatbelt. But what happened? Gradually, society went through the process of educating us about the benefits of seatbelts, to now, where if we see someone driving without a seatbelt, we say, La ilaha illallah, what is this guy doing? Doesn't he realize how dangerous it is? We became educated about a subject, we saw the value in that subject, and we stopped that action as a part of the community. Today, see someone that, for example, who doesn't smoke. He doesn't smoke or she doesn't smoke. Why? Because they say, I see the harm in that smoking, and I don't want that harm. I find it to be something ugly. I find it to be something bad. People are not indifferent to the action. Why? Because when I became educated of all the harms that are associated with it, I made a decision to say that I don't want to subject myself to that harm. I want to stay away from it. Imam Sadiq is explaining the same thing, that when us, the Ahlul Bayt, see an action in front of us, the reason we don't do it is that we can see that it is something that is hated by Allah, and that we don't want to do it because to us that action is ugly. To us that action is bad. Therefore we won't do it. And we can follow that example, that the better we educate ourselves about what Allah commands us to, the more we see that what Allah dislikes, we dislike. Examples of this are, for example, halal and haram meat. Baba, the burger looks exactly the same. But one I say makes my mouth water, and one that is haram, I look at it and I say I don't want to touch it. They look and smell maybe exactly the same. But what happened? When I became educated about the desire that Allah has for me and what Allah likes, that which Allah likes became beautiful, became delicious, became tasty. And that which Allah dislikes, no matter how beautiful you make it, I don't care. I don't want it. It's not exciting to me. Why? Because I saw that this object will take me away from Allah, and I wanted to stay away from it. This is how the knowledge of an imam works. That an imam, when he looks at an action, he looks at the desirability of what Allah wants, and he prefers that action over anything else. Now understand something. The goal of Imam Hussain was always to reform and repair the nation of Rasulullah. and to correct the nation of Rasulullah. And what Imam saw in the beauty of repairing the nation of Rasulullah and acting whatever it took to save the religion of Rasulullah is the action that the Imam took, no matter how hard or difficult that action was, to ensure that the religion of Islam persists the way it was intended. And the Imam was successful in this. You see, if you take a look at the history of Islam, until the revolution of Karbala, the Khalifa was both a king and a religious authority. You'll see that amongst the madahib al-am, they'll take hadith of how, for example, the Khulafa would enact the teachings of Islam. But immediately after the event of Karbala, no Khalifa had the authority to dare to speak for the religion of Islam. Rather, what you saw is after the event of Karbala, the Khalifa would keep these judges and these religious authorities and these heads of these schools of thought to guide him on the religion, and would not dare to say that I will talk about and what I say is what Islam wants. This was the direct conclusion and the consequence of the actions of Imam Hussain of revealing the true face that this Khalifa has no connection to Allah. Otherwise, why would this Khalifa threaten, endanger, harm, kill the grandson of Rasulullah? This was one of the conclusions that the Imam proceeded to present into society. And what the Imam did was he knew that my goal is at whatever cost, I need to preserve the religion. The preservation of the religion, whatever cost it comes at, the action is beautiful in the eyes of Allah, whatever it takes to fulfill that goal. Therefore, we would say that the Imam was not devaluing his life, or the Imam intentionally proceeded to an action that would lead to his death. But the Imam refused, and he said, "Mithli la yubaya' mithluhu." One like me can't submit to him because that action is ugly and hated by Allah. My actions need to be that which is loved by Allah, and I need to do what Allah likes to see because that action is beautiful, and such is the preservation of the religion of Islam. Therefore, when we look at the events in history to see what did Imam Hussain do in Karbala, it has nothing to do with him not valuing his life or intentionally proceeding to the cause that would cause his death. No, it was that whatever action would be necessary to preserve the mention of Islam was not a sacrifice that the Imam wasn't willing to perform. Whatever that sacrifice was, if Islam is saved, the Imam will proceed in that direction. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Sallu ala Muhammad. So, okay, fine. We take this example out. Let's go back to the verse that we began our discussion with. Doesn't this verse tell us that Allah has done predestination, that the one that Allah wants to save, He makes it easy for him, and the one that Allah wants to punish, He makes it hard for him? Allah has already decided who are the people of heaven and who are the people of hell. This idea of interpreting this verse and other instances where we say that if Allah knows everything, then He knows what I'm going to do, must mean that Allah has already decided who's going to hell, who's going to heaven. This concept, if we don't approach it correctly, we come to different conclusions. And in the religion of Islam, there are 4 different schools of thought, or 4 different opinions about what happens in the situation. That is it jabr or is it tafweed? Is it free will or is it predestination? One of these schools of thoughts, which doesn't quite exist anymore, was that of the Mu'tazila. The Mu'tazila were similar to the Ja'fari school of thought, but they said that it's all free will. Man can do whatever he wants to. Man has full discretion. Anything he wants to do, he can do, and Allah has no say in this. This is similar to what St. Augustine says in his work, where he talks about God being the clockmaker, that Allah has set the world into motion, and now the clock is running and the world does whatever it wants, and God just had to begin it, and then He walked away from it, and He has no He has no entry into this. It's entirely free will. The second opinion that came about was those who were called the Mujabira, who said that it is all jabr, that everything is forced. Allah has written everything, Allah has determined everything, and these were the people who stepped forward after the waqia of Karbala and said, we didn't do anything. Allah made us do it. Allah has predestined this event, and He forced us into this. Even if we didn't want to do it, we were forced to do this action. And that therefore, don't blame humanity, don't blame the Khalifa, don't blame the religion. It is Allah who spilled the blood of Hussain. We don't agree with this ideology either. The third example was that of the Ash'ira, which is similar to the concept of Jabr, but they called kasb or bargaining. And what they said is that Allah has mostly yani, set everything into place and it'll be, exactly as Allah has written. But sometimes if you make dua, Allah can change something. Sometimes it can change, but mostly it's already preset into place. Madhab Ja'fari, when this question was asked, هل هو جبر أو إما تفويض? Is it something that is predestination, that Allah has dictated everything? Or is it free will, that man has the freedom to do whatever he wants? When this question was asked of our sixth Imam, he replies and he says, لا جبر ولا تفويض بل هو الأمر بين الأمرين. That the way that reality exists with Allah is it's not all predestination, it's not all free will, but rather it's between these two of free will and predestination. So they asked the question, Yabna Rasulullah, what do you mean? How is it between predestination and free will? And the Imam says, let me explain to you. And the Imam turns and he says, stand up. No, stay seated. I'm not asking you to stand up. The Imam tells this man to stand up. The man stands up. The Imam says, now pick up one leg. And the guy picks up one leg. Imam Sadiq says, now pick up the other leg. I say, Yabna Rasulullah, I can't. How will I be standing if I pick up both legs? The Imam explains that this is the concept, that where Allah gave you the free will, that there are some things that you can choose to do and you have the freedom to do, and that there are other things that are beyond your capacity. That this is how Allah has balanced existence, that there are some things that you have the freedom to know about and choose, and others that you don't. Now this concept, to go further, is that how could we understand this concept if, for example, right, it's only one item at a time, and if Allah knows everything, then He knows what I'm going to do. And if He knows what I'm going to do, then how can it be that He hasn't already decided what I'm going to do? This statement has a problem in it. Are you guys with me? Everybody's awake? We're getting a little philosophical. You all right? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I know it's late. I'm going to try and make it interesting and keep content, but if you stop the salawat, I stop. We have the same rules as last year. Nothing changed. Let's take a look at this philosophically. When we make the argument that because Allah knows, then He must know what I'm going to do, and if He knows what I'm going to do, then how can it be that it's outside of the fact that I have the freedom to make this decision? The mistake that you're making is that you're thinking of Allah has to follow time chronologically. But Allah doesn't exist in time. Time, you can't measure Allah in time. Because the assumption if you can measure Allah in time is that there's a time where He was and a time where He wasn't. Time is one of the creations of Allah, and Allah exists out of time. The way that I can best explain this to you is today you look at a painting. When I look at this painting, I can't see what was the first mark the painter made, what was the last mark the painter made. The painter had the freedom to pick and choose whichever mark he wanted to make in whichever order, to change it, to make it, to break it. But when I look at it, I see the entirety of the picture. In the same concept, because Allah is not restricted to time, that He can see this one first and that one, He can see everything simultaneously because time is not a restriction. Allah sees the entirety of our life an and ma, at the same time. There's no guessing or surprises about what Allah can see and what Allah knows. Rather that it's all consistency, that Allah sees everything in the same process. Another example of this, to try and explain, how is it that Allah can know everything, yet not force me to do it? How is it that Allah knows all of the good things that I want to do and all of the bad things, but He's not forcing me? Is under the assumption of understanding something that now technologically we can understand. Historically, this would have been a difficult concept to explain, but now it's very easy. Have you seen predictive AI? Have you seen a self-driving car? Does that self-driving car decide for me where I want to go? Or does it react to the decision that I make? What happens is that when we sit in that car, there are a number of things we can do. I can turn right, I can turn left, I can go forwards, I can go backwards. That computer is designed in such a way that it says, whatever this person decides to do, I know what the next thing is going to be. The knowledge of that AI, the knowledge of that computer does not imply predestination. I still have the freedom to choose, but the fact that whatever I choose, the system can accommodate for it. When we make the statement that the knowledge of Allah insists that I have to do this action, it implies that the knowledge of Allah is limited. That Allah can only encompass the knowledge of one decision that I can make, and therefore He forces me to make that one next decision because that's what Allah has known. But when we talk about the knowledge of Allah, وَسِعَ كُرْسِيُّ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ, that His throne extends over whatever is in the heavens and the earth, is an explanation saying that the knowledge of Allah is unlimited. Whatever option you want to choose cannot be outside of the ilm of Allah. Do whatever you want with your life. Allah is still well aware of everything, and there is no way that you can escape the knowledge of Allah. In this, we can start to understand that Allah and His knowledge of what I'm going to do doesn't insist on predestination. I have free will. I can do whatever I want to do. But it doesn't mean that Allah can't compensate or can't predict or know that I have the ability to do this action. And His knowing this action does not force me into one action or another. Understanding all this, let's go back to the complication of the ayah that we began with, where we said, فَمَنْ يَرِدِ اللَّهُ أَنْ يَهْدِيَهُ يَشْرَحْ صَدْرَهُ لِلْإِسْلَامِ. But Allah is telling me in the Quran that who I want to guide, I will make it easy for him. And who I want to lead astray, I will make Islam difficult and hard for him. This is where people have misinterpreted this verse, that Allah is forcing us into an action, instead of realizing what Allah is saying is that if you come towards Allah, He will welcome you and make it easy to come to the path of guidance. And if you choose to sin and go in the wrong direction, Allah doesn't have to give you guidance. It's the choice of your actions that, do I want to be closer to Allah or do I want to be further than Allah? Sometimes it happens that someone comes and they ask 1,001 questions and they want to talk all about Islam. It's wonderful. It's great. I like talking about Islam. It's kind of why I do this. But if at the same time, if you're asking me about Islam and you're committing sins outside in society, the impact of the knowledge of Islam won't sit within you. It won't make sense to you because my character, my spirituality is conflicting with the information. This is the description that Allah is giving. That if you come towards Allah, He will make finding hidayah easy for you. And if you turn away from Allah, then that same thing that you see will not mean anything to you and you won't find a solution in this. Which is why, if you want to talk about verses of Quran that talk about predestination, then take a look and see that there are others that deny predestination. Where Allah, for example, says, إِنَّا هَدَيْنَاهُ السَّبِيلَ إِمَّا شَاكِرًا وَإِمَّا كَفُورًا. That Allah makes a statement, He says, we have shown you the way. Whether you be thankful and follow it, or whether you disbelieve and be unthankful. Allah repeats in the Quran, place after place, كُلُّ إِمْرِئٍ بِمَا كَسَبَ رَهِينٌ, that every man is responsible for what he has wrought. How could it be that Allah has forced me into an action when He's telling me that you will be held responsible for your own actions? This points to a story. You guys want to hear a story? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. This question of predestination is one that has confused Muslimin for generations. And at one point in time, a very notable personality comes to the door of the sixth Imam and wants to ask the sixth Imam a question. But the sixth Imam isn't home, and his young son, Musa ibn Ja'far, Imam al-Kadhim, comes to the door as a young man. And the person says, is your father home? I want to talk to him. And Imam al-Kadhim says, he's not home. He says, you know what? You're from this family. Let me ask you a question. Let's see what you know. And he asks Imam al-Kadhib a question that goes to the effect of, does Allah force a man to commit an action? Or does a man do an action by himself? Imam al-Kadhib, as a young man, young boy, replies and he says, the answer to the question has three possibilities. He says the first possibility is that Allah forces a man to commit an action. If this is the case, that Allah forces a person to commit an action, then Allah cannot have a day of judgment where He punishes somebody because, well, He's the one who committed the action. He forced you to, so why can't He punish you? So therefore, the lie that He promises that there is a day of judgment is a lie. That's impossible. He says the other option is that Allah is a partner with you in the action. That you want to do something, and Allah does it with you. In this case too, if Allah is your partner and He's assisting you in this process, then he's definitely the stronger of the two partners. You're the weaker one. And if that's the case, then it would be unjust of Allah to punish the weaker partner and not punish the stronger partner. So therefore, this too is impossible. He says the only option that remains is the third option. That if Allah has promised there is a day of judgment, and Allah has promised that there will be a day of accounting, and people will be rewarded and people will be punished, then it has to be that man chooses his action of his own will, and man is therefore answerable to his actions to Allah entirely. And he earns a reward or a punishment based upon what he does himself. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So what does the involvement of the will of Allah, why then do we pray? Why do we say things like, MashaAllah? That Allah is the one who has the right to do whatever He desires. The explanation of this comes back to the most practical aspect that we possess today. Is that how do I actually do something? You see, what you want to do in your life is not only up to you, but it needs a support system to accomplish it. I'll give you an example. We're in Virginia. I'm from Pennsylvania. You want to come visit me in Pennsylvania. You make the intention, I'm going to go see Sheikh Bilal in Pennsylvania. I'm going to surprise him. You don't know my address and I'm not telling you. You make the decision, you're coming. You figure out my address, you Googled me, you found whatever. You made the intention, you made the desire. You got your things together, you put everything together. You go to start the car. If that car doesn't start, are you coming to Pennsylvania? This is the example. I can make the intention, I can make the effort, but if Allah doesn't assist me in its execution, the same way, I can make the intention to drive to Pennsylvania. But if the car doesn't start, am I going to Pennsylvania? I'll be stuck in Virginia. It's the same concept. Why do we invoke Allah? Why do we ask for His assistance? Because it is the assistance of Allah that helps us accomplish the irada that we possess, the intention that we possess. That every action, when Allah assists us, we complete that action. And this is why we say the statement, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. There is no strength or might except for the assistance of Allah. But Allah is so merciful and so kind that He makes it in such a way that if my irada was evil, but Allah didn't let the action execute, He doesn't record a sin for that action. He doesn't punish me. But if I made the intention of doing something good, but then I didn't receive the assistance of Allah and I didn't accomplish it, Allah still rewards me for that action. Look at the mercy of Allah. There's a description in the hadith that talks about marad, sickness, and that how this sickness is one of the difficult things that we deal with. But Allah is not negligent of a person when they go through sickness. How? One of the ahadith explained to us and say that when a man intends to perform the mustahab nawafil prayers of Allah, the malaika come to participate and to write reward for him. And if they come every day to write that reward for that person when they perform the nawafil, one day when they come, the person isn't performing the nawafil. So they come back dejected to Allah. And they explain, oh Allah, we went to go record the thawab for your believer, but he didn't come to you today. He didn't come to perform that nafilah. He didn't come to perform your ibadah. That when they complain to Allah like this, the reply comes that my abd, my servant, is in a state of illness and he's in a state of difficulty. Had the servant not been in a state of difficulty, they would have been busy in my ibadah. So therefore, write for them as if they are continuing in my ibadah. Don't reduce in any of the reward, because their desire was still to be with me. This is the beauty of that concept, that when we want to do good, if we make the intention, it is matloob, it is desired. It doesn't mean that Allah forced us to it. And this is the beauty of the justice of Allah. Which is why today, the door of being the companion of Abu Abdullah has not been closed. that those who were the ashab of Abu Abdullah, those who were the companions and the loyal and faithful ones who stood with Imam Hussain in the field of Karbala, Allah did not close that door for you. That if we still make the desire, Ya laytani kuntu ma'akum fa'afuza ma'akum fawzan azima. That, woe Abu Abdullah, had I been with you, I would have attained a great victory with you as you went through those difficulties. Allah tells us that this action, if you desire this, I will write you amongst the supporters of Abu Abdullah. Allah has even appointed someone to take these names. There's one of the companions of Imam Hussain known as Habib. If Allah gives us the tawfiq to go to Karbala, you'll notice that all of the shuhada are buried in one place. Habib is buried in another place. Habib's grave is separate because he was the leader of all of the companions in the army of Imam Hussain. And his grave is the place where you go to have your name written amongst the companions of Abu Abdullah. Do you know why Habib was different? It was because of the love that he held for Abu Abdullah. It was the love that he held for Imam Hussain. That one who loved Imam Hussain the way Habib did, it's not that you wish to go to Imam Hussain. It's that Imam Hussain calls you to himself. They describe and say that when the condition of Kufa had deteriorated and the paths were blocked, many of the companions and lovers of Ahlul Bayt had been arrested, but this Habib was in his house in the evening when a messenger comes to the house of Habib in the evening time. Habib receives this message and returns to his table, returns to his family. And his wife asks him the question, "Oh Habib, what is the news that you bring? Why was someone at our door so late?" Habib replies and he explains, he says, "I have received a message from my master Abu Abdullah. He has called me to himself. He has called me to come to his assistance." Can you imagine that your Imam would call you to his assistance? Can you imagine that today, that if the call of Imam Zaman would come, what must my character be? That the remainder of Zahra would want me to be with him. This is the personality of someone like Habib. But that personality is one that acknowledges and knows and pays attention to his generations, that the love of Ahlul Bayt is in his generations. Qasim, the wife of Habib, says, "Oh Habib, what is your intention then?" Habib says, "If I go, then it is certainly towards perdition." And she says, "But your master has called you." He says, "Yes, but what will happen to you? What will happen to our son Qasim? Who will take care of them?" In a poetic sense, they describe and say that the wife of Habib says, "Habib, then you stay home in hijab. I will go to the nusra of Abu Abdullah." Habib says, "This is all I wanted to hear from you, that my lineage will continue to love Imam Hussain even after me, should I be honored to present a sacrifice for the son of Zahra." The condition of Kufa was so poor that a curfew had been established. The curfew was so severe that a man who came into Kufa only to collect his debt and knew nothing, the police of Kufa arrested him and took him to Ubaidullah. And they said, "Ubaidullah, this man has violated your curfew." The man says, "Oh Amir, oh governor, I know nothing of this curfew. I am not from Kufa. I have no relationship here. I only know one person in the city and I came to collect the debt. I will collect my debt and leave." Ibn Ziyad Mal'oon turns and he says, "I believe him, but kill him anyway." They said, "Why, if he's telling the truth?" He says, "If the people of Kufa see that I will not tolerate violating my law even by an honest man, they won't lie to me." In this condition, Habib tries to find a way to exit to support the Imam of the time. This is the example of the love of the companions of Abu Abdullah, of how much they loved him. That you and I would look at this and say, "My life is in danger. How can I go to the Imam? They will cause me harm. It's not possible for me to proceed in this direction." The one who truly loves Ahlul Bayt is not stopped by these things. Habib takes his servant and he says, "Take my horse out grazing outside of Kufa and stay there. I will meet you in the middle of the night." Secretly in the middle of the night, Habib escapes the city of Kufa. When he proceeds outside, he finds that this servant is speaking to the horse and saying, "Oh, horse of Habib, maybe our master has been stopped, maybe he has not come. You have prepared yourself to go to the assistance of Imam Hussain. If Habib does not come, I will take you to the assistance of Abu Abdullah." Habib cries in the aspect of seeing, oh, how difficult the condition of the son of Zahra, that the servants and the slaves are taking mercy upon the son of Zahra. The loneliness of Abu Abdullah is so extreme that even those who have nothing want to give for Abu Abdullah. Habib, looking at this attribute in the slave, he says, I free you. You have nothing to me now. You are free to go about your way. That slave cries and complains. He says, oh, Habib, you kept me within in your life. Now when you are going to salvation and service of Ahlul Bayt, you leave me. He says, let me come with you. Even if I run behind you, I want to go to the service of Hussain ibn Ali. Habib is one who presents his sacrifice in the field of Karbala, as many of the companions did. There were those whose love for Abu Abdullah was like that of Abis ibn Shabib. Abis ibn Shabib was one of the notable braves of the city of Kufa. When he came into the battlefield of Karbala, they had surrounded Abu Abdullah and were attacking him from every direction. Abis stepped into the battlefield with the intention that he should take the army away from Imam Hussain and save his life. But when the army of Umar Sa'ad saw Abis enter the battlefield, and those who were about to approach him, the army said, no, don't fight him. He's one of the bravest men of Kufa. If you fight him, you will certainly die. So they turned away from Abis and they went back to Abu Abdullah to fight him. Abis again called out, fight me! Leave the son of Zahra! Leave the child of Rasulullah. I am here for you. They said, no, you are brave. We won't fight you. So Abis then threw down his shield. He said, I will fight you without a shield. They said, we still won't fight you. He took off his armor. He threw away his sword. He said, leave the son of Zahra. Abis is standing in front of you. They describe and they called out that Abis has lost his mind. Abis ran into the middle of the army of Umar Sa'ad crying, Naam, Naam, laqad ajadnani hubbil Hussain. The love of Hussain has driven me crazy. They describe and say that this Abis, to save the life of Abu Abdullah, they encircled him in every direction, and even without armor, they were afraid to approach him. So they stood from a distance and threw stones at him until they killed him out of his fear. These were those who loved Imam Hussain. But even one who makes mistakes can love Abu Abdullah. And that was the example of Hur. That the one who was responsible for forcing Abu Abdullah into this situation, the one who kept Abu Abdullah away from the city of Kufa, when he comes to the realization that Hussain ibn Ali will truly be killed, when he realized that Umar Sa'ad has decided to then attack and kill the grandson of Rasulullah, they said, we saw Hur shaking in fear. They asked, oh Hur, if anyone asked us who is the bravest man in all of Kufa, we would have certainly given your name. Why do we see you so afraid? Hur would reply and say, he says, I see myself standing between heaven and hell, and there is nothing that I prefer over heaven. He says, how shall I return to Hussain ibn Ali when I am the one who has brought him to this difficulty? He takes his son and his servant. He says, oh my son, tie my hands. Oh my servant, cover my eyes. Take me in front of Hussain ibn Ali as a prisoner goes. When he presents himself in front of Abu Abdullah, if this is how the companions love Imam Hussain, look at the love of Abu Abdullah. That this Hur who is responsible for these difficulties stands in front of Imam Hussain and he says, Ya Abu Abdullah, forgive me. Abu Abdullah says, oh Hur, I forgave you before you even came this far. Hur says, oh Abu Abdullah, give me permission to present my sacrifice first. Hur and his son and his servant go out into the battlefield. When they go to fight, they describe and say the battle of Hur was fantastic. But his son falls before Hur falls. His son, as he falls in the battlefield, calls out, my salam to you, O father, I have fallen. Hur wants to go to the side of his son. He can't find his son in the battlefield because of the press of the army. He says, oh my son, I can't find you, call out to me. The reply does not come from the son of Hur. It comes from Abu Abdullah, who calls out, oh Hur, here is your child. Hur comes and he sits by and he says, oh Abu Abdullah, why did you come? We are the ones who are the ones at fault here. We are the ones who have to make amends to you. Abu Abdullah replies, he says, "Oh Hur, did you not know it is inappropriate for a father to have to lift the body of his grown son? Oh Hur, did you not know it is inappropriate for a father to come to be the first to the body of his son? Oh Abu Abdullah, you are offering a comfort to Hur, but very shortly it will be your Akbar in the field of Karbala. And it will be you who will come to him alone, and you will be unable to lift that body in that situation." It is in this that Hur then presents his sacrifice. One by one, the companions of Abu Abdullah go and lay their lives for Imam Hussain out of the love that they possess for him. And it is the love of Abu Abdullah that every time one of them falls, Abu Abdullah proceeds to the battlefield and collects their bodies and announces that you have preceded me and I am soon to follow you, until eventually all of these companions are spent. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره ندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم. We call out 10 times all together, we raise our voices. Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah. Ya Mahmud بحق محمد يا أعلى بحق علي يا فاطر السماوات بحق فاطمة يا محسن بحق الحسن يا قديم الأحسان بحق الحسين يا الله بحق فاطمة وعبيها وبعلها وبنيها والسر المستودع فيها. Accept this small ibadat from us. Ya Allah, by the right of this majlis, forgive our sins and cover our flaws. We have gathered here with hajat, fulfill our hajat. Ya Allah, by the rights of these tears in our eyes, those amongst our families, our communities, the mu'mineen who are sick and suffering through disease and difficulty, give shafa'at to the mu'mineen wherever they are. Give aman and security to the mu'mineen muslimeen in this world. Ya Allah, keep our children on the upright path of Islam. Hasten the reappearance of the son of Zahra. Make us and our families from the upright supporters of the son of Zahra. رحم الله من يقرأ سورة الفاتحة مع الصلوات. اللهم